You've heard of the San Andreas Fault, but there is another zone in the Pacific Northwest that seismologists say is long overdue for the big one. We'll talk about that on this week's Skywatch TV. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me on the panel is Skywatch TV CEO and best-selling author Dr. Thomas Horn. Tom,
good to be
welcome.
here.
And the producer of a new film that we recommend. We've watched this, and the production values are great, but beyond that, the information is solid, based on scientific information from professionals in the field. The film is called Cascadia is the Big One, and we welcome to the program the producer, Steve Quayle. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Well, good morning, Derek and Tom. And again, we're at a time point in history, unlike any other time, and we get to view it in real time. But what we're going to see are going to be images that defy description. Having said all this, Tom, you and I have spoken over the years, decades now, about all the different things, what happens when the old gods return. Christianity was the inhibiting factor and the imprisoning factor to those who would have destroyed the world and were about to do it had God not intervened through Noah's flood and then kept them chained. But now we're in a time where literally with paganism absolutely surpassing and suppressing Christianity, not because of God, but because of the Christians not recognizing their authority. This is a big deal. So in talking about Apophis and talking about the lifting up our eyes for our redemption draweth nigh, most people don't even lift up their eyes to the sky unless it's a pink moon. Well, I got to tell you something. We got to deal with stuff beyond a pink moon, a blue moon, a green moon, 5 moons, red moons, and hopefully I'll leave it at that. Okay, we don't want to see anybody mooning anybody.
Yeah.
But Tom, again, as you saw the video and you were reminded of the vision that God had given you, it started putting things together. And, Derek, it's interesting because all of us on talk radio, authors, researchers, we've always had the framework and we've had bits of the puzzle. And now it's like the hand of Almighty God is putting all the pieces into play for us to see the big picture. And I think that's a blessing. Thank you guys for having me on, because Cascadia, the big one, we're talking about minimum 8 million people's lives lost. I'm on record as saying I've been at Yellowstone, filming Yellowstone every year for 48 years, flying down there in the winter, checking with thermal cameras. Is there any activity in the lake itself? No. And right now, it's critical that, as we were talking off air for a minute, is the fact that the Cascadia subduction zone is giving indications that it can go any minute. That's not scare. That's not fear porn. That's scientists. It's long overdue.
Yeah, that's actually the scientists that they're world class. They work for the federal and state governments. They're in your program, and that's what they are saying. In fact, one of the fabulously illustrated animations in there that show these underwater and under earth, what are they? The plates.
Tectonic plates,
right? The tectonic plates and how they're moving over each other. And one of your scientists on the program talking about how we're something like maybe 100 years past due.
Right. On average, there's a major quake along that subduction zone every 244 years, and we're now more than 300 years since the last one. So,
right.
We're at what did you say, Steve? Any minute now? Yeah.
Any minute now. And the word is subduction just means this. The Pacific plate is going under, okay? An overthrust means it goes over. Subduction goes under. But that amount of pressure, listen, I didn't know this, you guys, is the greatest amount of pressure in the world, okay? So we literally are in the midst of a volcanic, seismic, and astral pressure cooker. And the indication is, when we were over Mount St. Helens, how cool is this? Getting multiple vents that were steaming at the right day, at the right time, at the right place. And it was like, seriously, I have never seen, in movies, what everybody does, obviously, but never seen the hand of the Lord directing. Literally, I'm on the phone to a Bluetooth headset, my cameraman on the Oregon coast. He said, Steve, we're over St. Helens right now. I said, I was just going to ask you to go there. And the deal is, because we're taking every single one of them. What's important for people to understand is this. When you have evidence, denial, you can deny, but you can't, how can I say this? You can deny and think you'll escape. the ramifications. But that earthquake will change the history of the United States. We will not have the same landmass. Concurrent with that is all the events taking place along the New Madrid. And then off of the East Coast, there's new volcanic calderas that have opened up off of Virginia, that whole area. You're not going to hear about this in the press, but you can see the evidence of it in all the flight plans that the NASA's research aircraft have flown. And you guys, they're flying 24/7. The orders are they have to have as much food. They're even giving U-2 pilots. I couldn't know this unless somebody told me, but they're giving U-2 pilots flight directions and flight altitude minimums, and then they're telling their 747s and their Gulfstream jets they have to have a tank of fuel, they have to have a longer reserve because they're so worried. And this is going on in real time. I'm not sitting here making it up as I go. So the history of NASA and the history of the U.S. Air Force and the obviously intelligence agencies, everybody, listen, here's something most people don't know. They don't share their data with each other, okay? And then we've had some huge earthquakes in the area around craters of the moon, which is, most people don't know this. Idaho is more problematic right now, again, than Yellowstone. This is 300 miles directly, Challis, Idaho, directly west of me in Bozeman, Montana. Interestingly enough, Tom, the last time I was in a helicopter, I'll be in it this weekend, all over the place, flying and photographing. But the point is that was at Craters to the Moon. And when we were down there, and it looks like a volcanic field like people on the Big Island of Hawaii would see, but also the Newberry volcano that's in Southern Oregon. That's really showing a lot of activity. And so when you get into Mount Baker, Mount Adams, you get into all these lesser known volcanoes, and most people seriously fly over them. They think they're just mountains. How many people recognize the amount of active volcanoes in the Cascade region? I think it's Emily Hoff, professor of geophysics at Oregon University, said that 11 or 12 of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world are there in the United States. Yet nobody gives it a thought. We'll look at Vesuvius, we'll look at the Italian volcanoes, we'll look at all over the world. And interestingly enough, when the late Sue Bradley was alive, she wrote the most masterful treatise on Krakatoa and the son of Krakatoa and the coming days. And right now, the whole area around Mount Tambora, biggest volcanic explosion recorded, and also Krakatoa recorded 1883. Those are active. So again, it's like this. It's putting so much pressure. If you put your left hand and push as hard as you can on your right hand, imagine at some point something gives. And if it's enough pressure, things are breaking. And seriously, it's breaking up. And I'm sorry, but as society is breaking down, the literal plates are breaking up.
Well, Steve, again, the vision that I wrote, people can get it for free. We're giving it to you for when you get Steve Quayle's new Cascadia is the Big One, superb documentary. We're giving you my new book, The Wormwood Prophecy, free. We're also giving you the 4-part Skywatch television series on the Wormwood Prophecy. We're giving that to you free. And why am I bringing that up? Because in that vision, again, I'm not a scientist. I only knew what I saw. When I got up out of bed, I wrote it down a year ago, actually, April of 2019. And there is a part in that vision that was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. And I see myself, I'm just on a hillside, a tall mountain, a small mountain, tall hillside. But I'm on top of this thing, and I'm with thousands and thousands of people, and we are running, and everybody is screaming and begging God to deliver them from the chaos that is coming. And I look over my shoulder, and here comes Apophis. I didn't even know it was the asteroid Apophis until I woke up, and the angel or whatever it was said that single word to me, Apophis, but it strikes the Pacific Ocean. This tsunami, moments later, is coming up over the top of this hill. I am terrified. I know there's no way we're going to survive this. Something lifts me up into the air. And then, Steve, it's what I saw. I wrote it down. I only understood after the fact that it was all based on the real science of what impact specialists say will happen if a rock the size of Apophis strikes the Earth. I wrote it down. The water becoming an aerosol, coming up into the upper atmosphere, this boiling water, creating hurricane-like effects. volcanoes going off, popping like fireworks. And as far as I can see along the coastlines, and this was the Pacific Ocean next to the Oregon coastline, as far as I can see in my elevated position, tsunamis taking out every coastal area, every coastal city. You talk about 8 million people dying. All I can tell you is that's what I saw. Now, what do you think is going to happen? Something along that, Cascadia region could happen before 2029. But if it doesn't, and all this stress, all this pressure is there, what's going to happen when a rock that is traveling 28,000 miles per hour and weighs literally millions of metric tons impacts that pressure zone along the Oregon coast? What do you think's the California coast? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I know, and I don't mean this, but I know I've seen the computer projections. I've seen the amount of the volume of material that's going to slough off into the ocean. You're talking about subduction. Remember, subduction, you're talking about something that was pretty much a little bit under the plate, but it goes down like this. Well, that drop can result, there's a formula, but if it dropped like 20 to 30 feet, that can push 200 to 300 feet. I'm saying, Tom, 2029 may be Apophis, but I'm saying before that, we're going to see some really horrific things. And what bothers me the most, and Henry Groover, he's gone to be with the Lord now, but he was on specific detail, when he was at Carnarvon Castle, which is in Wales, when he saw the Russian and Chinese invading the West Coast. And if Henry was a man of God who had a walk supernaturally attested to all over the world, but it's when they invaded that all this stuff started to happen, and the volcanoes were erupting, the jet engines of all the Russian and Chinese aircraft and stuff. And we're at such a perilous point now where even Attorney General Barr just said that China's the number one problem in the world. Well, some of us have been warning about that for 20 years. And so what I'm saying is, if people don't understand this, that from ancient history, the thing that they feared more than anything were the cataclysms, the astral cataclysms. That's why there are observatories all over the world. It's the thing they feared. It's the thing the fallen angels feared too. And the fallen angels knew the meaning of it. So they're getting, you know what it is, bottom line? They get 42 months of rage on earth to seemingly pay back God. Remember, they can't touch God, but they tear up the image of God's creation. We in America have torn up the image and likeness of God in 100 million plus abortions. We are a bloody nation, and there's only one way to wash the blood. And I'm saying this with fear and trembling, Tom. I believe God gave you that vision. And I believe that between now and the vision that you had in your time frame, and I remember when I interviewed you about that, that's your outside. It can happen before then. 2025, the Deagle report says that the population of the United States will have gone from where it is present day, 350, 360 million, down to 70 million. What are the events that are going to transpire? I'm telling you this.
Yeah, and not to jump into dispensational theology, but it was Derek Gilbert that pointed out to me that the date for the impact that NASA originally put up online, Friday the 13th, April 2029, is exactly 3.5 years after that date in 2025 that you're giving, and the Feast of Tabernacles and the Feast of Trumpets, all of this stuff very much connected to prophecy. And, most dispensationalists believe there is going to be a 7 years of tribulation. And heading into that period of time is, it's the time of Jacob's trouble. It's the time when lots of stuff starts happening on the earth. The earth starts shaking. There's earthquake activity in many places. Jesus says, these are all the beginning of sorrows, but the end has not yet come. So that's where I think we are. This is what this feels like. And I'm even amazed that you and Henry Groover giving these predictions about Russia and China specifically years ago, when we had a great relationship with Russia, and because of our economic pact with China, they were not about to attack us back then because, they were living off of all of the money and everything else that we were giving them through these deficit trade agreements, all of which Donald Trump has gone to war with. And now with coronavirus and Trump being very vocal about this virus originating in China, now all of a sudden the whole dynamic has changed, and both Russia and China look like they could become part of this, I know you guys don't even like the term Gog Magog, the make way for the armies of the east, but it does look like something is coming together now very rapidly. And so I believe Apophis is going to strike the earth in 2029, but I'm not saying that things aren't going to get very bad before then.
Okay, and I want to go on record. I'm not arguing over anything, but I'm just saying this. It's 42 months, and obviously I don't believe it's 2029, Tom. I think it's earlier in the thing because, again, the whole war with Russia and China. I went on record, I think 7 years ago, even with you guys, saying that here's the word the Lord gave me. Before he allows Russia and China to destroy the United States in a nuclear attack, he's going to reveal the sins of the leaders to the people, and the people sins before a holy God. Even some of my critics said, well, boy, that couldn't have hit on anymore. Because, again, God is just. He's merciful. He's pleaded. And we haven't taken it. By the way, Donald Trump obviously has been in office for almost 42 months. So here's the thing. I think the problem comes is this. Even a lot of events can take place up until that time, but I believe it is before, 2029, and I believe in everything from Jacob's trouble. And Gog and Magog, what most people leave, and you were the one that drew my attention to this, Tom, is Isaiah 13:3 in the Septuagint, but what most people don't understand, Gog and Magog were two giants. And they are the patron saints. I don't know if you know this, Derek, but they are the patron saints of the city of London.
Right, yeah.
The city of London was set up by Brutus, okay? Mm-hmm. And here's what's fascinating, too. Just a little tidbit. It's fascinating that the history of Stonehenge and some of the megalithic monuments around the world in their own woodcuts of 500 to 600 years ago, and what monks were doing in their spare time when there's nothing else to do, and certainly they didn't have to worry about Netflix, okay? They basically were sitting and they were using old woodcuts and stuff, some even going back to the 1100s, of the giants holding the rocks on their shoulders and building Stonehenge. I am on record as claiming that obviously the great megalithic monuments, whether it's in Peru, Derek, or in Europe, or on the island of Malta or Sardinia, those were built by giants. And it's interesting, the scientists say, well, that just couldn't have happened because it doesn't fit our paradigm. Well, guess what, boys? Your paradigm sucks, You've denied reality, and if you don't think it's denied, one of the things they did, 900 records that I found in the Smithsonian about everything being found that was given to the Smithsonian, it disappears, and they say we know nothing about it until we had one of the individuals who was allowed to see the secret treasures of the Smithsonian due to his a relative his being a very famous scientist in the world of geology, who, when asked why are all these geologic features in the Grand Canyon by Egyptian names. His name was Dr. Troy Payway. He said, because of the interesting artifacts that were found there. So the point is that the history that we've been given, and I've talked to people after Coast to Coast, Tom, that said they were on the military excursion teams that extracted the giant sarcophaguses out of the different Grand Canyon areas. And by the way, gentlemen, 90% of the Grand Canyon is off limits. When you and I, Tom, and the film crews went down into the Southwest, you remember Dr. Cliff Mahooty and others, they told us what was going on. That's how we got the title Long Walkers. And I'm telling you this, long walkers, if people would recognize that there are straight talkers telling you about long walkers, you could get a better handle on history.
Well, Steve, so you and I basically agree on everything. I would argue that with regard to Apophis, that's going to happen in 2029. But that doesn't mean that's the first asteroid that could strike the Earth. That could happen before then, because the Bible does describe the Earth reeling to and fro like a drunkard, massive earthquakes like the world has never seen before. And that's the period of time I think we would agree we have entered into. Now, this other issue on giants, again, Isaiah, the day is coming when the gates of the earth, are these somehow connected to these, I don't know, to the plates? We know that the ancient belief was Sheol Hades is confined somehow inside, beneath the mantles of the earth. And I'll let you guys weigh in on that, Derek.
Well,
But is some of this activity, when the Earth starts reeling and rolling and rocking, is that also a signal of, or even maybe a causative effect on what causes the Earth to open up, and then these entities? You know, it says that the angels that are bound in the great river Euphrates, are loosed upon the Earth.
Well, that question is essentially what I'm going to address in my presentation for the virtual True Legends Conference, and also the book that Sharon and I are working on for Defender Publishing, because we're going to argue that there's another geologically active part of the world, the one that runs from the Red Sea through the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, Mount Hermon, and up into the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, is in fact exactly what you describe, a place where the gates of hell literally open. And we're going to connect it to primordial chaos and to the end of days as well. It also connects to the giants, because as Sharon and I did the research for the book Veneration, which deals with the occult religion inspired by the Nephilim giants and their demonic spirits, which continue to this day, we noticed that their activity happened to be clustered right along that line.
Now, you say line, you're talking about a vault line?
I'm talking about the fault line. Scholars call it the Dead Sea Transform, and it's one of the most geologically active areas in the world. And you can plot on a map the significant spiritual, biblically significant spiritual events of history, and plot it right along that line from Turkey down to the Red Sea. And we think that, well, clearly, when the Mount of Olives splits north to south, there's something that's going to happen there again, but there will be things that happen between now and then that are significant. So the presentation that we're going to give for True Legends, I think, is going to be groundbreaking. But there are other, as Steve has pointed out with the documentary film, Cascadia is the big one, other significant locations around the world. And when we're talking about all this, I think the important thing to remember is that we're not just dealing with the natural realm. We've got to account for the spirit realm as well, because it's the principalities and powers and cosmic rulers over this present darkness that we ultimately are contending with. So when you get the documentary film, Cascadia is the big one. Steve Quayle, again, as Tom mentioned earlier, we'll add not only his book, The Wormwood Prophecy, which deals with another prophesied catastrophe, and of course the 4-part Skywatch TV broadcast connected to that, where we deal with some of the prophetic implications of it. And that's where we first discussed the connection between the arrival of asteroid Apophis, the god of chaos, and the Feast of Tabernacles 3.5 years earlier. But bringing this back around to the supernatural connection, Steve, you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to touch on before at the end of this broadcast. Off air, you told us about occult rituals taking place near the geologically active zone in California. Rituals taking place there connected to this god of chaos, trying to invoke and somehow summon the god of chaos?
No, not summon the god of chaos. The god of chaos in the form of a fallen angel with one of the most evil religious figures on the planet, which I don't want to reveal right now just because, got enough heat. But the point is that they are going to each mountain and they're opening, Tom, the portals. They're doing ritual magic, similar to Blavatsky, similar to the Nazis, and they're literally opening the gates of hell. Now, what's fascinating is in all the history I've studied and researched, you always have, where there's a volcano, you always have the appearance of flying saucers in antiquity, for what it's worth, giants, and even the eyewitnesses from Costa Rica that have detailed sketches to me of the beings and the beasts coming out of the volcanoes just in the last couple of years, Derek. This is what's so they're literally what I'm saying, ritually going physically to those locations. Two very powerful men. One's a human that's given himself over totally to Satan. One's a fallen angel who they all acknowledge as being, if you will, the Lord of Chaos. That's not just a rock and roll term or an old band. That's literally an entity, just like death, hell, and the grave are entities.
Right.
So we are in a full-fledged supernatural evil battle, and Jesus has given us power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt us.
This coincides. This actually corroborates something that I've been hearing from a friend of ours that we've attended. We've spoken at a couple of conferences here in the last few years dealing with the giants of old, sons of God, giants of old. Dr. Judd Burton's conference that he holds in Lubbock, Texas every year. And a gentleman who He is himself a victim of SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and works with victims of it today. Said that his contacts who are kind of buried underground, they're embedded in the occult so they can report on what they're hearing from practitioners of this kind of these dark arts, say that they're hearing from those who are trying to summon these entities that somehow something has opened a portal going back about 18 months now. They feel as though something has been opened, something very bad, very evil is coming through, and they don't know how to stop it. Well, of course they wouldn't,
Right.
because they're trying to do it the wrong way. I mean, greater is he that is in us than he that's in the world. But it's interesting that those who are trying to contact these entities, Steve, are now corroborating what you're saying, and that something has been opened, and that. But I think the important thing for us to remember is that whatever's coming through is only doing so because God is allowing it.
Well, and so we would think, right, okay, this is, if it weren't for the Bible, we would say this is all just fanciful thinking, people making stuff up, whatever, right? It's
20 years
sci-fi,
ago, that would have been me, yeah.
It's sci-fi or it's whatever it is, except that it's the Bible who talks about when God returns, that he will be in literally a war with the ancient pagan gods. I think it was Zechariah that says he will be terrible unto the gods. So it's very specifically a part of end times prophecy, the return of these ancient deities, the worship of these ancient deities. Isn't it amazing? Like we talk about wormwood, I tie that to Revelation 8 in the Bible, but in Revelation 9, another star, an astron, that's actually the word, an asteroid, is given the key to the bottomless pit, and they have a king over them down there. Steve and I have done all kind of programs on that. But at the end of Revelation 9, the plagues that are falling on all these people that were worshiping these demons, it says, and yet they repented not of their sorceries, of their pharmakia, of their efforts to open a doorway in order to make contact with illegal spirits. They did not repent of it. So the Bible tells us this activity would be going on.
Yeah. Well, sadly, this conversation has gone by much too quickly. I'm going to come over here so that we can get all three of us in the shot here. Again, as Tom said, it seems like this would all be made up, like a Hollywood movie plot, if it weren't prophesied in the Bible. And we know that those promises are true and sure. And so we as Christians, we need to understand, we are deployed on a battlefield, whether we recognize it or not. And there are multiple aspects, multiple facets to this war. As we understand barely, as sort of the game of checkers from a spiritual standpoint, the enemies are playing three-dimensional chess. Thankfully, our Lord and Savior is playing 11-dimensional chess.
Amen.
Steve Quayle, the producer of the new documentary film Cascadia, is the big one. Please take advantage of this offer, and thank you for watching as we keep watch. With Tom Horn, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.